Okay, so today we're going to start with the first day of word problems. Everybody's favorite, I know. However, these are algebra word problems, and algebra word problems are often pretty simple if you can figure out how to write an equation. And that's what we're going to do. We are going to determine a variable, what it stands for. We're going to write an equation for the situation, and then we just solve the equation. So let's go ahead and start off with the very first one. Whenever you have a word problem, you're going to probably have to read it more than once. So my advice would be to read it all the way through. So let's go ahead and do that. It says here that Keith scored 3 less than twice as many points as Kevin in the basketball game. Together, they scored 30 points. How many points did Keith score? So it might be everybody's gut to just start playing with numbers and try to get the answer, but this is algebra, and in algebra, we do everything systematically. So we're going to start by coming up with some labels. The labels are going to be what we're talking about in the problem. So if you look, we're talking about 2 people. We're talking about Keith, and we're talking about Kevin. And if you think about that very first statement, Keith scored 3 less than twice as many points as Kevin in the basketball game. If you think about that, Keith is being compared to Kevin. So Keith is going to be our lone variable. So my labels over here are going to be the people that we're talking about. We're talking about Keith, and we're talking about Kevin. And so since it said Keith scored 3 less than twice as many points as Kevin, that means Kevin is going to be X. Because we don't know how many points Kevin scored, but we know something about Keith. We know that Keith scored 3 less than twice as many as Kevin. So think about that. It's 3 less than twice as many as, let's call Kevin X now. We want an expression for that. Less than means that we're subtracting from what comes after. So twice means we're multiplying by 2. So Keith is going to be 2x minus 3. So it's 3 less than, that's the minus 3, is 3 less than twice as much as Kevin, and Kevin is X. Together, they scored 30 points. So what that means is this expression is representing Keith's score. This expression is representing Kevin's score. Together, they scored 30. So that now brings me to my equation. My equation is going to be 2x minus 3, Keith's score, plus x, Kevin's score, equals 30. And the question is, how many points did Keith score? Well, we can't figure out how many points Keith scored until we figure out how many points Kevin scored, and Kevin is x. So what we do is we solve this equation for x. So we combine our like terms. 2x plus x is 3x minus 3 equals 30. Solve for x. We're going to add 3 to both sides, and we get 3x is equal to 33. Divide by 3, and we get that x is equal to 11. So that 11 is how many points Keith scored. Keith scored 11 points. I'm sorry, Kevin. Kevin scored 11 points. Keith, however, scored 2x minus 3 points. So we would do 2 times 11 minus 3, and that would be 22 minus 3, which is 19. So since the question was how many points did Keith score, the answer to the question is 19 points. And at the very end, you always need to circle your answer, the answer to the question. So you'd always have to go back and look at the problem and say, okay, well, what's the actual question? Let's move on to the next one. All right, number 2. 2 numbers have a sum of 35. One number is 4 less than twice the other number. What are the 2 numbers? All right, so what we're talking about here is 2 numbers. So my labels are going to be first number, second number. So I'm going to say first number and second number. So then it says the next sentence, so this, and they have a sum of 35. So it might help to write sum equals 35. That means the first number plus the second number will be 35. So now let's go ahead and read the next sentence. It says one number is 4 less than twice the other number. So one number is being compared to the other number. So one of these numbers has to be x, and then the other one is 4 less than twice the other. So 4 less than, whenever you have less than, the word than means that the 4 comes after the next bit in the sentence. So twice the other number, so let's say the other number is x, so we're going to say 2x minus 4. Together, they're 35. The sum of the numbers is 35. So we have to do, the first number is called x, plus the second number, which is 2x minus 4, and that's going to equal 35. And then we're going to combine our like terms to get 3x minus 4 equals 35. And then we're going to isolate our variable. So add 4 to both sides, and you get that 3x is equal to 39, and then you divide by 3, and you get that x is equal to 13. So one number is equal to 13. The other number we would plug in for x. We would do 2 times 13 minus 4. Since 2 times 13 is 26, and 26 minus 4 is 22, that would be the other number. The other number is 22. So the question, what are the two numbers? Well, the two numbers are 13 and 22. So I'm going to put a box around that because that's my final answer. You also can check them. You know that the two numbers have to have a sum of 35. You could add those two numbers together. Does that equal 35? It sure does. Okay, let's move on. All right, question number 3. Question number 3 says the sum of three numbers is 123. The second number is 9 less than 2 times the first number. The third number is 6 more than 3 times the first number. Find the three numbers. Oh my gosh, that sounds crazy. That's why we have to read things over and over again. So starting with the first sentence, I would just take it a sentence at a time. The sum of three numbers is 123. Well, let's write that. The sum is equal to 123. All right? All right, we have three numbers. So I'm going to write first. It's also being referred to the second, the first, and the third. So you want to refer to them as the first number, the second number, and the third number. Okay, it says the second number is 9 less than twice the first. So the second number is being compared to the first. Do we know what the first number is? We don't. So we can call it x. And then the second is 9 less than twice x, basically. So remember, since it's less than, it's going to be minus 9 at the end. 2 times the first, well, that would be 2x minus 9. All right, then it says the third number is 6 more than 3 times the first. Again, the third number is being compared to the first number. Well, we called the first number x, so that might help you. So 6 more than is addition, right? If I say I have $5 more than you do and you have $10, well, you would add 5 to 10, right? Here, 6 more than 3 times the first, we would say 3x plus 6. And the only reason I'm putting plus 6 at the end is because that word than, but when it's addition, it doesn't matter. Only subtraction, the order matters. So if you wrote 6 plus 3x, that's fine. All right, so then it says find the three numbers, and we have written here just equation. With this particular assignment and for your homework tonight, I'm not going to make you solve all of them. So if it doesn't say solve, you don't have to answer the question. You just have to come up with the labels and the equation. So this might make some of you feel incomplete. If you feel like solving all the questions, you can. I'm just trying to save you guys some time because I know you know how to solve equations. What you need to learn how to do is set up the labels and the equation. So the equation we would use to solve it is we would know that since the first sentence said the sum of three numbers is 123, well, we are going to add all of these together and make that equal to 123. So I'm going to write x plus 2x minus 9 plus 3x plus 6, plus 6 equals 123. And if you wanted to simplify it to start with, I would also accept a simplified answer. Like if you look at these right here and you're like, oh, all I have to do is combine my like terms, 3x, 2x, and x. Well, that's 6x, and negative 9 plus 6 is negative 3. You could also just write your equation like that. So you can write it all out and leave it, or you can simplify it and leave it. Whatever is easiest to you. So again, we're not going to solve this one just because I'm trying to save you guys time. If you feel like solving it, go for it. Alright, so far, if these questions have seemed pretty simple to you, or you feel like you're really understanding, go ahead and try stopping the video and coming up with the labels and the equation for this. And this one does say solve. Go ahead and try to solve it if you want. If you're still a little iffy, stay tuned in right now. Your choice. All right, so what I would do is read the question. So 4 friends are talking about how many cousins they have. Jack has 2 fewer than Amy. So right now, Jack is being compared to Amy in this case. Susie has twice as many as Amy. Oh, so Susie is also being compared to Amy. Okay. Jessica has 5 less than Susie has. Jessica's being compared to Susie. Jack and Jessica have the same number of cousins. Find out how many cousins each person has. So because the first 2 sentences have somebody being compared to Amy, I would say Amy is probably going to be X. So let's start by just writing down the names of these cousins. We've got Jack. We've got Amy. We've got Susie. And we've got Jessica. Okay? So we could start the first sentence by saying Jack has 2 fewer cousins than Amy. So we're talking about Jack, but he has 2 fewer than Amy. We don't know how many cousins Amy has, so let's make Amy X. And Jack has 2 fewer than Amy. Well, that would be X minus 2. Susie has twice as many as Amy. Okay, well, Susie has twice as many as Amy. So if Amy has X, then Susie has 2 times X, right? So we did that one. Susie has twice as many as Amy. In the next sentence, Jessica has 5 less than Susie has. So now we're talking about Jessica. Jessica has 5 less than Susie. Well, Susie, just being compared to Susie, Susie has 2X. Jessica has 5 less than that. So that would be 2X minus 5. All right. Now, the next sentence says that Jack and Jessica have the same number of cousins. So it doesn't give me a sum of all the cousins, right? It just says that Jack and Jessica have the same number of cousins. Well, that's easy then. Our equation is going to be Jack, who is X minus 2 cousins, will equal Jessica, who has 2X minus 5 cousins. Right? Because X minus 2 represents how many cousins Jack has, and 2X minus 5 represents how many cousins Jessica has. They have the same amount of cousins, so I make those expressions equal to each other. And now we can solve this equation. There are variables on both sides, so I have to collect my variables. I'm going to subtract X from both sides, and that's going to give me negative 2 equals X minus 5. Then I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And I'm going to get that the answer for X is 3. Well, what does that 3 represent? Well, that 3 is X. So over here, X is Amy. That means Amy has 3 cousins. So I write 3 next to her. Jack is going to have X minus 2 cousins. Well, 3 minus 2 is 1. Well, that means that Jack has 1 cousin. And then Susie has 2 times X. Well, since X is 3, 2 times 3 is 6. So that would be Susie has 6 cousins. And then Jessica, well, Jessica has 2X minus 5 cousins. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, minus 5 is 1. And if you look, the sentence that said Jack and Jessica have the same number of cousins, well, that's fact, right? Jessica has 1, Jack has 1. So my answer, I'm going to circle, these numbers at the end are 1, 3, 6, and 1. And that's how many each cousin has. All right, so for this one, notice all you have to do is come up with the labels. And so again, labels is writing down who we're talking about and the expressions that represent these people. And the equation is just the equation based on what you know about each one. So what I want you to do for real this time is stop the video, try to come up with the labels in the equation on your own. Notice it doesn't say solve, so you can just come up with labels in the equation. All right, so this one is one where you have to actually read through the entire question first before you start trying to write labels in equation. Many of you might start with the first sentence and said Shirley and Joelle, and you may have written down labels as Shirley and Joelle. But you have to keep reading because it says Shirley bought 5 skirts and Joelle bought 8 skirts. They each spent the same amount of money. Okay, so you might want to say here that Shirley and Joelle equal each other, right? Because they each spent the same amount of money. So that's one way to think about it. Right now they haven't compared Shirley and Joelle's cost at all. They've just said that they're equal. The next sentence that says each shirt cost $6 less than each skirt. This is my sentence that's comparing shirts to skirts. And then even the question here is how much was each item and how much did each of the girls spend? That's a clue that we need to know how much each item is. And then once we know that, then we can figure out how much the girls spent because they spent the same amount of money. Okay? So that's when I put shirts and I put money here as shirts cost and skirts cost. And then this sentence right here is our clue as to what our labels are. Each shirt cost 6 less than each skirt. So the shirts are 6 less than the skirts. We didn't know the skirts, so the skirts were X and the shirts were X minus 6. Then we're like, okay, well, what do we do with this? Well, up here, Shirley bought 5 skirts. Well, if the cost of the skirt is X and she bought 5 of them, you're going to multiply that by 5. So this right here is how much Shirley spent, 5 times X. And then Joelle bought 8 shirts. Shirts were X minus 6. So you're multiplying the X minus 6 by 8. They're equal because Shirley and Joelle spent the same amount of money. And this is one where you don't actually have to solve it. If you did solve it, the value of X, once you solve it, would be how much a shirt cost. You would have to subtract 6 to get how much a shirt cost. And then to figure out how much they spent, you just have to multiply X and 5 together or do X minus 6 and 8. They would equal the same number. But you don't have to solve this one. All right, again, I encourage you to try to do the labels, the equations, and this one actually says solve. I encourage you to try to do it on your own. So I would stop the video, read it, and give it a try. So this one's a little bit easier than the last one. We have oranges and bananas. An orange is being compared to bananas, and an orange has 20 fewer. Fewer means subtraction, than a banana. So I call banana X, orange is X minus 20. Then it says 7 bananas. So this is representing 7 bananas, right? 7X. Has the same number of calories as 9 oranges. Has the same number of calories as 9 oranges. Oranges are being represented by X minus 20. You have to put this in parentheses because you got to figure out the calories before you multiply it by 9. How many calories are in a banana? Well, banana would be X, so we're going to solve this for X. So I'm going to get 7X equals 9X minus 180. We're going to subtract 9X from both sides to collect our variables. 7X minus 9X is 2X equals negative 2X equals negative 180. Then we're going to divide everything by negative 2. And we're going to get that X is equal to 90. And that's the answer to the question, 90 calories. We're going to write calories on it here to make us remember that we're talking about calories. If I asked you how many calories were in an orange, I'd solve for X, and I would do 90 minus 20. All right, we only have 3 more left. Seriously, if you haven't tried one on your own yet, try it on your own. Stop the video and do it. Then come back in, make sure you did it right. All right, this is what I would do for this question. It said here that together the chair, table, and lamp cost $5.62. So I wrote down that I wrote chair, table, lamp, and I wrote down the total was $5.62. Then it says the chair is 4 times as much as the lamp. So the chair is being compared to the lamp. I don't know how much the lamp is, so I'm going to call it X, but I know that the chair is 4 times that. And then the table is 23. Oops, I realized I just wrote 20. It should say 23 there. 23 less than the chair. And then that's going to change the 20 in my equation as well. So since the total is 562, you just have to add all these expressions up. And you didn't have to solve this one. You just had to come up with the equation that would give me the answer. So if I did have to solve this question, you would solve for x, then you would know what the lamp was, but the question would be find the cost of the table. So you would just put whatever x is into the table expression, and that would give you the answer. I would accept this is your equation or this is your equation. So the next two problems have to do with perimeter. They are comparison problems, but they're very specifically perimeter problems. So it's important to understand what perimeter is. So question here, how do you find the perimeter of any shape? Well, if any shape, you're just adding up all the sides. So you just add all sides. And then specifically, if we were talking about a rectangle, there's a formula we can use. What formula can we use to find the perimeter? Well, if you think about it, when we have a rectangle, the length and the width are basically the two lengths would be these two, the two widths would be the other ones, and they represent the same thing, right? So we could just take all four sides and add them up, but because we know that the two widths are the same and the two lengths are the same, then there's a formula that just says that 2 times the length is plus 2 times the width, plus 2 times the width will equal the perimeter. All right, so keep that in mind when you do perimeter problems, especially rectangle problems. Remember that there are 4 sides to a rectangle, so there are actually 4 things you have to account for. That's the biggest mistake people make with perimeter problems. All right, so now it says Mrs. Rocket has an in-ground pool at her house. The perimeter of her pool is 70 feet. The length of the pool is 5 less than 3 times the width. What is the length of her pool? So for this one, my personal opinion is whenever you're doing a perimeter question, I would draw the shape, right? So I'm going to draw this shape. Here's my pool. And I'm going to label my pool. It says that the perimeter is 70 feet. So that's the total all the way around. I'm just going to write P equals 70 on the inside. Okay? Then it says the length of the pool is 5 less than 3 times the width. So the length is being compared to the width. So the width is going to be X or W, whatever. So I'm going to call this side X, which also means this side is X, right? Then it says the length of the pool is 5 less than 3 times the width. Well, that would be 3X minus 5. 5 less than means subtraction, 3 times the width. And then this side would also be 3x minus 5. So there's 2 ways to write this equation. One way would be to just add up all 4 of these sides, make it equal to 70. Another way would be to think through the formula. I'm going to do 2 times the length. Well, the length is this, because there's 2 of them. I'm going to do 2 times that. So I'm going to write 2 and in parentheses 3x minus 5 in parentheses plus 2 times the width, right up here, 2 times the width. Well, there's 2 widths. The width is x, so that would be plus 2x is equal to the perimeter, 70. And so now we're going to solve this equation. And so when we do that, we distribute. We get 6x minus 10 plus 2x equals 70. Then we're going to add our like terms. 6x and 2x is 8x, so 8x minus 10 equals 70. Add 10 to both sides, which gives us 8x equals 80. Divide by 8, and we get that x is equal to 10. And so the question is, what is the length of the pool? Well, x is representing the width, so that would be x is 10. But that's not answering the question. The question is, what's the length? Since the length is 3x minus 5, I'm going to do 3 times 10 minus 5, which would be 30, minus 5, which is 25. So the length of the pool is 25 feet. That is the answer. All right, number 9. So sometimes perimeter problems aren't explicit, like they don't say the perimeter. You have to just know that they're talking about the perimeter. For example, this one right here is talking about Bryn is putting a ribbon on the outside of a picture frame to decorate it for her mom. She needs a total of 50 inches of ribbon. The length is 3 times as long as the width. The dimensions of the picture frame. What are the dimensions of the picture frame? So if you think about this one, I want to know the dimensions of the picture frame. The picture frame is going to be a rectangle, and I know it's a perimeter question because what am I doing with the ribbon? I'm putting it around the shape. So let's start this problem by drawing a rectangle. And the rectangle is my picture frame, right? This is my picture frame. It says she needs a total of 50 inches of ribbon. So that means the perimeter of the picture frame has got to be 50. The length is 3 times longer than the width. Well, we don't know the length, but we know the width is x. We know the length is 3 times longer than the width, so that's x plus 3. So I like to always label all 4 sides so I don't forget. If I want to, I can add up all the sides right now and make that x plus x plus x plus x is 4x plus 6, or I can use the formula. I'm going to use the formula because that seems to be the most common way to do it. So it's going to be 2 times the length, which is x plus 3. And then we've got 2 widths, which is 2x, and that's going to equal 50. Or if you wanted to, you could have just said that the equation was 4x plus 6 equals 50. We're not going to solve this one because it's just asking for the equation. All right, and last but not least, again, if you want to stop the video and try this one on your own, feel free. I'm going to go ahead and do it real fast. So it says that the first side of a triangle is 5 centimeters shorter than the second side. So we're talking about a triangle now. Good to know. The third side is 3 times the first side. If the perimeter is 150 centimeters, what is the length of the third side? And this one we have to do labels, equation, and we have to solve it. So it's a triangle. I would start by drawing a triangle. And because they're labeling the triangle, or they're saying first side, second side, third side, I would put little numbers over here. I'm going to call this one my first side, this one my second side, and this one my third side. That way I don't get them mixed up. So now it says the first side. So we're looking at the first side is 5 centimeters shorter than the second side. Do I know how big the second side is? No. So I'm going to call that x. But the first side is 5 shorter than x. So that's going to be x minus 5. Remember, the order of subtraction is important. The third side is 3 times the first side. Well, the first side, we have to be careful. The first side is x minus 5. The third side is 3 times that, not 3 times this. That's why it's important to write first, second, and third. So the third side would be 3, and you're doing 3 times the entire side, so you have to put the x minus 5 in parentheses. And then it says that the perimeter is 150, so I'm just going to write that in the middle. So this one, there's not a fancy formula for this. You have to actually add up all the sides. So you are going to write your equation is going to be all sides. So the first side, x minus 5, plus the second side of x, plus the third side, which is 3 times x minus 5. You got to put in parentheses. That is going to equal 150. And then I'm going to solve this equation. You got to distribute that 3. So I'm going to have x minus 5 plus x plus 3x minus 15 equals 150. And notice when I distributed that, I got 3x minus 15. If you had written over here that the third side was 3x minus 15, that's correct as well. You could put either one, doesn't matter. So now we're going to combine our like terms. So x plus x is 2x plus 3x is 5x. Combine negative 5 and negative 15, that gives me negative 20. And that's going to equal 150. So now we're going to add 20 to both sides. We're going to get 5x equals 170. We're going to divide both sides by 5, and we're going to get x is equal to 34. So now, we've done all this work. We haven't actually answered the question, because the question is, what is the length of the third side? So I'm going to go over to my expression for the third side, and I'm going to plug 34 either into x in the top one or x into the bottom one. I'm just going to do it in the bottom one, so I'm going to get 3 times 34 minus 15. So 3 times 34 is 102, and 102 minus 15, let me fix that, 102 minus 15 is 87. So the third side is actually 87 centimeters, because this whole thing was in centimeters. And there you go. So when you're doing problems like this, it's important that you read that problem many, many, many times. And then if you are instructed to solve the equation, you should make sure you always go back and reread the question to make sure that you've answered the question. To get full credit for problems like this, you do need to do your labels. You do need to do your equation. And then if it says solve, I want to see your steps for solve. For your homework, if it doesn't say solve, you just have to do the labels in the equation and you just stop. So anywhere it says solve, you have to come up with the answer. If it doesn't say solve, you're not actually coming up with an answer to the question. You're just writing the labels in the equation you would use to come up with the answer to the question. You're welcome to solve all your homework problems if you feel a little weird about not solving them, but you're not required to. I'm trying to save you guys time. All right, good luck.